Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're super thrilled to have this WeSys webinar brought to us by the AWS team. AWS has always been a strong contributor to the WeSys organization, and we're thrilled to have Christine and Liwa here presenting on implementing a security risk program in the cloud using AWS services. My name is Lynn Dome, and I'm Women in Cybersecurity Executive Director. We often go by our acronym WeSys, and it's spelled W-I-C-Y-S, and we pronounce it We Sis, like we sisters, because that's exactly what we are. We are a cyber sisterhood. And we're a 501c3 member-based organization having over 5,150 members with representation in over 70 countries. We have 43 professional affiliates, which are mini WeSys organizations, and they're in Africa, Australia, Canada, France, India, Pakistan, the UK, and all throughout the United States. And we also have over 140 student chapters. Our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity, and we do so by creating opportunities. So we have an online member forum where all our members can network and connect together. Within that forum, we have special interest groups such as military spouses in cybersecurity, Latinas in cybersecurity, data privacy, cybersecurity law. You name it, there's a special interest group in there for you. And if there's not, you could go ahead and launch your own. We have skill development training programs brought to us by Google, Bloomberg, Facebook. AWS builds out an entire roadmap, and coming up in 2022 will be for their third year in a row doing that for all our WeSys members. We also have Target and SANS Institute and many other strategic partners that build out training programs as well. Our newsletters and webinar series are ongoing, and we offer scholarship grants and awards not only for our conference, which will be coming up in Cleveland, Ohio, March 17th through the 19th, but other conferences as well. Our Cyber Talent Emergency Fund is there for college students that are in their last 4 semesters of graduating. They could apply and receive up to $599 within 48 hours, so that that financial burden doesn't take them away from their cybersecurity studies. We have speaking and media opportunities for our members to be what others can see, and that's the cybersecurity professionals they are. The Job Board Plus Plus is where our strategic partners have a booth. They post all their jobs in year-round, and they have access to all our resumes. Our members also have the opportunity to update their profiles, upload their resumes, and get recruited from our Job Board Plus Plus. In addition to all that, we participate in market research. We have an apprenticeship program, internship program, leadership summits, virtual and in-person career fairs, and so much more. Our mentor-mentee program has 775 mentees and 191 mentors, and we develop and design a curriculum to upskill and uplevel women no matter where they're at in their careers, preparing them for the next level of advancement. We have all this and so much more. So if you haven't done so already, please check out our website at wesys.org. And we owe this all to a special thanks of our strategic partners, AWS, Bloomberg, Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute, Cisco, Facebook, Google, Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, Optum, SentinelOne, AbbVie, JP Morgan, Chase & Company, LinkedIn, Navy Federal Credit Union, Nike, Wayfair, Workday, Accenture, American Airlines, Arctic Wolf, Champlain College, Dell Technologies, Envestnet, Flatiron, Fortinet, Haystack Solutions, Here Technologies, The Home Depot, IBM, Indiana University, MITRE, Motorola Solutions, Oak Ridge National Lab, Palo Alto Networks, PayPal, Salesforce, SANS Institute, Schlumberger, SmoothStack, SpearTip, Starbucks, Target, University of California, San Diego, and Verizon. Whew, that is getting to be quite a mouthful, and I bet you all didn't expect me to read them all, but I do each and every time because we're really proud of strategic partners. They are the foundation of all things WeSys. So today we have the awesome honor to have Christine and Liwa here, and they're going to be presenting incredible information on the AWS services. And so now's your time to ask these questions. So throughout the webinar, please post your questions in the chat that's on the bottom of your screen. And when it gets to Q&A time, Christine and Liwa will take it from there. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our newsletter. We are offering initiatives and opportunities all the time, and we're always pushing it out through our newsletters, and those offerings come in fast, and they always have deadlines. So we want to make sure that you're up to date on all things WeSys. The subscribe form is in the top tab of the right-hand side of the screen when you go to wesys.org. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it on over to the AWS team. And Liwa, I'll have you take it from here.
Thank you for the introduction, Lynn, and I'm so excited to be here. My name is Liwa Wallaby. I'm a senior assurance consultant with the AWS Security Assurance and Services team, and we help customers remove compliance roadblocks here on AWS. I have over a decade experience in the industry. I've been with AWS a little over a year, and I am excited to be joining you today. Over to you, Kristen.
Thank you, Lua. Hello, everyone. I am Christine Harper, and I too am a senior assurance consultant at AWS with Security Assurance Services. And I'm also a PCI DSS QSA. Prior to AWS, I was in information security for one of the world's largest credit card processors. And I also have an additional almost 14 years of background experience in IT. Back to you, Lua.
Thank you, Kristen. First, I'd like to thank everyone for carving out the time to attend our presentation on implementing the security risk program in the cloud using AWS services. We are excited to share our knowledge on risk management and how to keep up with the ever evolving threat landscape. During this webinar, we will be diving deep into implementing a security risk program in the cloud, specifically within AWS, using some of the best practices and core technology services. The concept of risk is well known, one that is embedded in all areas of business, security being a part of it. Risk management, when it comes to security, is a critical piece of any governance and security program. I'm of the opinion that without applying risk management concept in a security program, the program wouldn't be effective. Implementing a risk program allows for a tailored and strategic implementation, one that is proactive. With an effective risk program, organizations are able organizations are able to leverage limited resources to achieve the most effective result. Implementing a risk program allows for a tailored and strategic alignment with the business, one that positions security and compliance as a business enabler. So, as a security and compliance professionals, an effective risk management program is $1 million tool in your toolbox. With a risk program that is proactive, you're able to steer your organizations to leverage limited and scarce resources in building a defense unique to your risk. I'm going to go over the following core risk management principles and their AWS technological components. Identifying and defining your risk management scope on AWS, touching on the core guiding principles for a robust scope definition, getting started on your asset inventory journey, creating and maintaining one on AWS. Few of the services that you can leverage to aid in the collection of assets information. Inventorying and analyzing access and connectivity to your AWS systems. I'm going to touch on threat detection and analysis with a nice segue into vulnerability identification as it relates to your AWS assets. Then we're going to wrap up with risk management techniques, some of our recommendations, and AWS best practices. Understanding risk. When conducting a risk assessment, the most common formula used today, I believe you've seen this, is the A plus T plus V equals to R. That is assets plus threat plus vulnerability equals to risk. Accurately assessing threats and identifying vulnerabilities as it relates specifically to your asset is critical to understanding the risk present. Threats and vulnerabilities shouldn't be generic. Understanding the differences that exist between these terms is the first step. Now let's break this down a bit. What is a threat? Anything that can exploit a vulnerability intentionally or accidentally and obtain, damage, or destroy an asset, which is why it is most effective when it is asset specific. A threat is what we're trying to protect against. Examples include human threats like ransomware attacks, denial of service attacks, and so on. Vulnerability. This is a weakness or gap that can be exploited by a threat vector to gain unauthorized access to an asset. Common examples include outdated software versions, overly pervasive network access or user access roles, and so on. Identifying the likelihood of a threat to exploit an active vulnerability that exists in an asset lies the power of a threat. When determining the likelihood, the strength of the existing controls should be considered or the lack thereof. For example, while you might have an EC2 instance holding a web application and accessible to the public internet, the probability of that asset to be susceptible to a ransomware attack will be highly dependent on the existing controls, such as having an endpoint protection service running and up-to-date software purchase on that EC2 instance. Risk management. This is a formal process of responding to risk items by identifying, monitoring, and managing potential risks in order to minimize the negative impacts that they might have on an organization. It has to take into context your organization's risk appetite and your risk threshold. When we talk about risk appetite and threshold, what do we mean? This is the amount of risk that organizations and stakeholders are willing to accept. This ensures that when you're responding to a risk, it aligns with your overall business objectives. To be very clear, risk is always a function of threats exploiting vulnerabilities. Thus, threats, whether be it actual, conceptual, or inherent, may exist, but if there are no active vulnerabilities, then there might be little to no risk. Similarly, you can have a vulnerability, but if you have no threat, then you have little to no risk. Now we're going to go into the deep end, establishing your risk assessment scope. A risk assessment is not a one-time exercise. Assessments should be reviewed periodically as you deploy new workloads into your AWS environment, adopt newer technologies. It is recommended the risk assessment be conducted at least annually, continuously, and should be dependent upon your organization's release plan. Setting the scope of a risk assessment is important to ensure security resources are appropriately leveraged. As a guidance, the scope of a risk assessment can be your critical assets. That is, assets that are of certain amount of value to your organization, such as assets with potential sensitive data or located in a particular network segment or exposed to the public, not necessarily all of your cloud assets. That being said, a good place to always start is by aligning your efforts with your existing policies. The first step, classifying your data. Start by identifying all areas where data is stored, received, and generated, the types of data you process, and set to classify them based on your data classification policy. For your AWS environment, AWS Macy is one of the cloud services that can be used for this exercise to identify the locations of sensitive data like credit cards, social security number, and so on. Within your cloud workload, Macy also allows you to monitor the flow of sensitive data, supports inbuilt common sensitive data identifiers, custom keywords, leveraging pattern matching, which is extremely useful if you're processing some of the non-common sensitive data types. With Macy, you shouldn't have to worry about the file types, and it is able to analyze different file and storage types, such as Apache Avro, Parquet file types, compression and archive, doc and test, and so on. You can also leverage Macy to enforce security policies like encryption, access roles, according to your risk threshold and compliance obligations automatically, while providing evidence of continuous monitoring to regulators. Once the types of sensitive data is identified, using a tool like Macy can provide a list of cloud assets housing this data. Additional data sources that can be leveraged when looking for the types of data present in your AWS environment are your network logs. You could start with your network logs, such as your load balancer logs, your VPC flow logs, which helps to identify network segments that might be transmitting sensitive data according to your data classification policy. The second step in your scope journey is your asset inventory. Collecting an accurate asset inventory is your next step to nailing down scope. An up-to-date inventory of your cloud assets within your scope ensures you have the appropriate oversight. With these, you can start analyzing vulnerabilities and connecting asset-specific threats. We'll discuss asset inventory in more details in the next slide. The third important step in defining your scope is the people, identifying who or what can impact security of these assets via your access control list is the final data to collect when you're when with the, when defining the risk assessment scope for your cloud assets. This will include users and systems connecting to your environment. This could be via direct access or APIs. I'll touch more on this in upcoming slides. Maintaining an asset inventory on AWS. What is an asset? An asset can be people, technology, or information. People may include employees and customers, along with other invited persons, such as contractors or guests. Information, on the other end, may include databases, software codes, critical company records, and many other intangible items. Asset management, as it relates to IT, is commonly defined as the means of ensuring each IT asset is accounted for as an owner and follows a defined lifecycle process. This includes controlled deployment, maintenance, upgrade, and disposal. In the concept of your cloud assets, such as EC2 instances, S3 buckets, maintenance responsibility can be shared between your organization and AWS. It is common for cloud assets to have shorter life cycle as little as less than 24 hours. This is the ephemeral component of cloud assets. Why is this important? It is important to know where and what your asset is to secure them. There's a common saying, you cannot secure what you do not know. With remote assets outside of your physical reach, this is even more important. Cloud assets are even more easy to deploy, leaving the onus on the organization to ensure proper guardrails are implemented to identify rogue assets. A common example of cloud asset misconfigurations are S3 buckets with sensitive information, such as EPHI records, that are left accessible via a public URL. On-premise asset versus cloud. Asset management on-premise versus the cloud are similar, with the exception of cloud asset ephemerality, which means an asset can be live this particular hour to support a workload during a high traffic season and be retired the next 2 hours due in slower season. Scaling up and down is one of the benefits of cloud resources, which might make it a bit challenging to maintaining a cloud asset inventory. To properly build an asset inventory, a good place to start is to use the AWS Systems Manager. The AWS Systems Manager allows you to collect asset inventory from both your on-premise and within your AWS environment. You could collect metadata such as running services, OS versions, and so on your resources. And if you're big on dashboarding, Systems Manager also allows you to sync inventory to your S2 and S3 buckets for consumption via a business intelligence solution, such as AWS Antenna, QuickSight, or any of our AWS partner BI solutions. With Systems Manager, you can automate risk management workflows. In addition to AWS Systems Manager, other available AWS features and data sources to help you with asset inventory include your AWS billing accounts, your AWS config. We have partner solutions and third-party cloud management database tools as well. Access and connectivity. When trying to connect an exhaustive list of systems or users with access to your AWS environment, a good service to use is the AWS IAM Access Analyzer, which provides you a list of all users and system roles within your account and with access to your AWS environment. The AWS Access Analyzer also gives you a report of iris access, including the length of time each account has been used to help you identify unnecessary accounts. With the access analyzer, system access can be supported by reviewing network logs such as your VPN logs, your load balancer logs, your API gateway logs, your VPC flow logs. These logs can give an idea of network addresses and locations of systems, both internal and external, that are accessing your environment via different network paths. During the process of collecting access data, identifying high-risk access can provide you an insight into existing vulnerabilities, specifically around logical access. High-risk access could be access with overly permissive roles and privileges. It is recommended that access be role-based and created with a least privileged model. Examples of IAM accounts or roles with overly permissive privileges are shared access with administrative privileges, or where you have a user account with access to AWS multiple accounts at the same time with no restrictions, accounts with no lockout policies or weak passwords. In addition to the AWS IAM Analyzer, other AWS services that you can leverage to collect threats and vulnerability information on your cloud assets include the AWS Inspector, Guard Duty, and so on. We'll discuss the services in more detail in upcoming slides. Now that you've established scope, you've established asset inventory, leveraging both your assets list. Now let's take a look at the threats. Threats are dangerous, and the extent to which they are dangerous is dependent on the existence of vulnerabilities to be exploited. Common threat sources include human threats, which are common technical and administrative related, natural threats such as floods, acts of God, tornadoes, and so on, including the pandemic. Environmental threats as a result of power failures. One of many benefits of moving to the cloud is mitigating risk associated with natural and environmental threats. AWS is responsible for this as the cloud service provider, and the architecture of the cloud is designed for availability and redundancy, mitigating the risk of single point of failure. It is important that threat sources are tailored specifically to your environment. Using the asset details which you've gathered during your initial scoping exercise, gathering threats specific to your asset has proven to be much more effective when identifying corresponding risk than gathering random threats data. Now let's look at threat detection and analysis on AWS. The AWS Guard Duty can be used to identify active threats tailored to your workload, such as unusual activities, compromised credentials, and so on. AWS Guard Duty is a highly advanced threat intelligence detection technology provided by AWS. It provides threat reports tailored to your AWS workload and performs active scanning against millions of threat intelligence database in real time. It leverages threat sources to include the AWS Security Intel. Imagine access to AWS Security Intel, open source AWS partners, and custom threat intels. Findings from guard duty can be integrated into centralized security monitoring solutions like AWS Security Hub for tracking purposes. There are other third-party threat intelligence solution tools that can be used to gather vulnerability information. Some of them include ScoutSuite and Prowler. These are open source tools and they are cloud auditing tools designed over the years for AWS environment. ScoutSuite and Prowler are open source solutions that collect active vulnerable points related to your cloud resource configurations. While they attempt to rate their findings using the CVE approach, you should leverage them to collect vulnerabilities and calculate the likelihood of the threats collected by guard duty to exploit the vulnerabilities using your existing controls. Risk management on AWS. There are four major risk management principles before we start diving into them specifically to AWS. This includes risk avoidance. Pretty much that's not accepting or failure to acknowledge that a risk even exists in the first place. Risk mitigation, active or future planned remediation activities to ensure that there are enough security controls in place to prevent an active threat from exploiting another vulnerability, eliminating the vulnerability or rendering the threat inactive. Then we have risk transfer. This is the methodology of employing the services of a third party to accept the responsibility of the risk. This is usually a cost-benefit analysis fail-safe for most organizations. Risk acceptance. Also, most of the time, it's a result of a cost-benefit analysis. Risk acceptance acknowledges that there is a risk and also accept the risk as it is without any additional effort. So how can you leverage AWS to manage risk? I'm going to let Kristen jump in here and take it from here.
Thanks, Liwa. AWS has many services to assist with the security that are just as vital as managing risk. Let's walk through how some of the AWS services you are already familiar with can help you with risk management. As discussed, to properly conduct a risk assessment, you must have the scope of the data and know where that data is located. AWS provides services to discover and protect your data in the cloud. This includes automatic data at rest encryption and key management by leveraging AWS KMS and AWS Cloud HSMs, encryption for data in transit using AWS Certificate Manager, and even machine learning that can automate the discovery, classification, and protection of sensitive data such as PII and cardholder data, as Liwa mentioned earlier. These type of data protection services allow you to store and manage your sensitive data in the cloud and protect that data in a secure manner while minimizing risk of the data exposure or leakage. AWS also provides infrastructure protection services that help you protect your AWS assets and minimize outside exposure. For example, Liwa also mentioned that AWS Systems Manager provides your teams the ability to create secure systems. It also allows you to create secure system images, apply patches, and securely configure the operating system, allowing your teams to inventory their systems and ensure systems are not misconfigured or unpatched. AWS WAF helps protect your applications from web-based exploits and also helps maintain application and data availability. AWS Firewall Manager centralizes firewall rule management, providing visibility into rules across multiple accounts and applications, and also allowing you to manage rules from a central location. Amazon Inspector automatically assesses applications for exposure, vulnerabilities, and deviations from security and compliance best practices. This provides you the ability to see the threats within your environment. These tools are intended to reduce the attack risk to your overall AWS infrastructure. Identity and access management. In my opinion, this is the most important aspect of protecting your data and minimizing exposure. In the 2021 Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, Verizon explicitly points out that credentials remain one of the most sought-after data types. Per the report, 61% of hacking-related data breaches involved credentials, and approximately 75% of breaches involved abuse of privileges. AWS provides several identity and access management related services to define, enforce, and audit permissions within your AWS resources. AWS IAM enables your teams to create and manage users, groups, and permissions to include AWS access from federated users within your own Active Directory structure. AWS also provides single sign-on services to reduce the number of passwords that your individuals must remember and continuously input. You can centrally manage multiple AWS accounts using policies by leveraging the AWS Organization Service. AWS Secrets Manager allows you to eliminate hard-coded credentials in plain text within your APIs and allows you to control access to secrets using the fine-grained permissions. An AWS IAM Access Analyzer allows you to identify if access is intended and safe, or that certain access is unintended and a potential security risk. These are all intended to give you the ability to reduce risk of unauthorized access to your data and environment within AWS. So how can AWS help your teams monitor for and detect anomalous activity in the cloud? AWS has several services that provide monitoring and detective controls, allowing you to have visibility into anomalous issues and allow your teams to address the risks before they impact your business. For example, AWS Security Hub has minimized the need for teams to switch back and forth between multiple tools to monitor thousands of security alerts, vulnerabilities, and anomalies. Security Hub provides a single pane of glass to aggregate, review, organize, and prioritize your security alerts from multiple AWS services, such as GuardDuty, AWS Config, and Amazon Inspector. As Lewa also mentioned, Amazon GuardDuty provides an intelligent and cost-effective option to detect threats and continuously monitor for malicious activity and unauthorized behaviors. AWS Config provides you a tool to assess, audit, and evaluate the configurations of your AWS resources, allowing you to compare actual configurations against a baseline set of rules to ensure compliance and security controls have been applied properly across all AWS accounts. Amazon CloudWatch and AWS CloudTrail provide visibility into your cloud resources for both performance monitoring and user activity auditing. These tools can evaluate logs and metrics and generate alerts based on defined use cases. The ability to see threats, however, does not actually mitigate or reduce the risk associated with the threat. So how does AWS help your teams minimize risk identified by these AWS detective services? AWS provides services that can be used to create automated responses to contain issues and to return to a good known state. Services such as AWS Config Rules can automatically take action by isolating resources, adding additional data to events, blocking specified configurations, and even restoring the configuration back to a known good state without manual human intervention. In addition, the use of serverless computing services such as AWS Lambda can respond to an event by running code that will allow you to scale your automated response to incidents and manage large-scale incident response requirements. AWS Lambda can automate many response activities such as system isolation, containment, eradication, and recovery, allowing immediate responses to occur and still maintain necessary information for forensic analysis. By automating response activities, you could potentially reduce the risk to your business that is associated with known threats immediately, allowing you to control isolation activities and conduct proper forensic investigations. As Lewa mentioned early on, risk management enables the business to make on-time, informed, proactive, and reactive risk-based decisions. Properly scoping data and assets is critical to identifying threats and vulnerabilities, and thus allowing you to apply appropriate risk mitigation strategies. As you've seen today, AWS provides many services to assist you with not only security, but managing risk. Liwa, would you like to step back in?
Thank you, Kristen. Now we're going to take questions from the audience. Um, so there is a question that I'm going to take first. This is if a vulnerability exists on a resource that AWS manages and the customer is not aware, how is risk managed from the customer end?
So in this case, the customer risk has been transferred to AWS. AWS is then responsible for mitigating the risks that are associated with that vulnerability. AWS also maintains a compliance program that incorporates multiple frameworks. So this would include requirements to manage vulnerabilities within AWS managed services. So ultimately, you're just transferring that risk to AWS.
Thank you, Christine. Another question that we have here is, how can we transfer risk to AWS as part of a risk management strategy? Um, how do you transfer risk to AWS? AWS offers managed services such as Aurora, DynamoDB, Lambda, where more controls are managed by AWS and then the organization leveraging them. The use of more and more of these managed services is a way to transfer risk to AWS. So you're sure that whatever controls or whatever oversight that you have is minimized, and AWS has the bulk of the controls.
All right, and another question we have is, what are some of the security controls available to address risk associated with misconfigured cloud assets?
That's a very good question. So one of the things that AWS has put into place is access reports. Like regular reports are generated about your cloud health, about the use of your account, and these reports are typically shared and made available to you via your account managers. Some of this report could contain locations or information about cloud assets that could potentially have been misconfigured. So one of the examples or one of the common examples that we see or the customers leverages and love this report for is S3 buckets. So when you have S3 buckets are publicly exposed or accessible, very publicly accessible URLs, this report could, that's one of the list of items that this report also provides. So there are multiple features that are built in from the point of deployment. For example, when you are about to set up a new S3 instances, there are multiple best practices that are already built in that when you're selecting, let's assume controls that considered when you're selecting features that could be considered high risk. AWS is going to notify you and let you know if this is really what you wanted to do, and get additional confirmation by second factor authentication to make sure that this is really it is your intention, for instance, to make sure that your S3 buckets are publicly accessible. So these are some of the features that are available today, just just based on the use of AWS systems and services.
I see another question as well. Where can you get more training on security capabilities of AWS? You can go to www.aws.training and get more training information from AWS, and you can select what type of training you would like. So you can choose things that are security related if you'd like. I think that's it for questions. If anyone has any more.
There is one that just came in. What AWS services are related to a zero trust architecture? Zero trust and zero trust architecture on AWS, there are multiple services that can be leveraged. Building AWS, I'd like to start by saying zero trust is conceptual. So the you have to there are different services that can be leveraged when you're trying to embed a zero trust architecture. While it is conceptual, we have the AWS well architected framework that I would recommend um, to you or to your organization that provides the AWS best principles and framework on how to actually architect your environment using some of our services um, it, while adopting zero trust principles. Um, like I said earlier, it is conceptual. So it is when adopting or implementing a zero trust architecture, it has to be tailored to your workload. It has to be tailored to your environment. Christine, do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
Yes, actually, there is also a blog on the AWS site regarding zero trust architecture on AWS. So if you want to search our blog, aws.amazon.com/blogs/security, it is exactly titled that Zero Trust Architectures in AWS Perspective. So you could take a look at that as well. It gives a lot of good information. All right, I think that answers that one. I don't see any other at the moment.
Should we give about like a minute or two and see if we have any other questions come in?
All right, I think that wraps that up, Lua. So we can stop presenting.
Inside.
Awesome. So thank you everybody for joining us today. We appreciate your time. We hope that you come back to these Bright Talks with WSIS. We enjoy the partnership with WSIS as well.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for coming. And we do hope you have gained some knowledge via this webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you.